The smartest person in the room is rarely the one trying hardest to sound smart. Have you ever noticed that truly intelligent people often say things that seem almost ordinary? They ask a simple question. They admit they don't know. They change their mind without feeling humiliated. And sometimes they say something so quietly that you only understand its importance much later. Most people associate intelligence with knowledge, with fast answers, complex words, confidence. But watch carefully. Real intelligence often reveals itself in a completely different way. Not through what someone knows, but through the way they respond when they don't know. The way they handle disagreement. The way they react when new information threatens what they already believe. Because words do more than communicate ideas. They reveal how a mind works. And there are 5 things genuinely intelligent people tend to say, not because they memorize them, and not because these phrases magically make someone smarter, but because certain ways of thinking naturally produce certain ways of speaking. I am the watcher. And here, in Shadow Insight, we look beyond the surface, at the hidden mechanisms behind human behavior. Today, we're going to examine 5 things smart people often say, and what each one quietly reveals about the mind behind the words. But stay until the end, because the 5th one reveals something most people misunderstand about intelligence itself. And once you see it, you may begin to notice that some of the people who sound the most intelligent are not necessarily the ones who think the deepest. If you enjoy observing human nature from a different angle, subscribe to Shadow Insight, leave a like, and tell me in the comments, what is one sentence that immediately makes you respect someone's intelligence? Now, let's begin with the first thing smart people are never afraid to say. The first thing smart people are willing to say is surprisingly simple. I don't know. Most people underestimate how difficult those 3 words can be. In a conversation, at work, or during an argument, there is often an invisible pressure to have an answer. Silence can feel like weakness. Uncertainty can feel like losing status. So people improvise. They exaggerate what they know. They speak with confidence about things they barely understand. But intelligent people tend to recognize something others often miss. Pretending to know is more dangerous than admitting you don't. Have you ever met someone who could never say, I don't know? No matter the subject, they always had an opinion, always an explanation, always an answer. At first, that confidence can look like intelligence, but with time, you begin to notice the difference. A smart person understands the limits of their own knowledge. They might say, I don't know enough about that yet. I could be wrong. Let me think about it. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of intellectual honesty. Because the moment you pretend to know something, you stop learning. And perhaps that is the first hidden difference between intelligence and ego. Ego needs to appear certain. Intelligence needs to understand. But admitting what you don't know is only the beginning, because the second thing smart people say reveals something even more difficult: their ability to question what they already believe. The second thing smart people often say is, I could be wrong. It sounds simple, but psychologically, it is one of the hardest sentences to say sincerely. Why? Because most people don't just have opinions, they become attached to them. An idea becomes part of their identity. So when someone challenges that idea, it no longer feels like a disagreement. It feels personal. This is why people sometimes defend beliefs long after the evidence has changed. Jung believed that people often hide from the parts of themselves they find uncomfortable. And one of the most uncomfortable things to face is the possibility that the person you disagree with may have seen something you missed. Smart people are not immune to ego, but they are more willing to leave a door open. I could be wrong. What am I missing? Show me how you reach that conclusion. These sentences do something powerful. They separate identity from opinion. Changing your mind no longer means losing, it means updating. And watch carefully. The person who can genuinely question their own beliefs is much harder to manipulate than the person who believes they are always right. Because certainty can feel like strength. But sometimes, certainty is simply a mind that has stopped looking. And the third thing smart people say reveals an even deeper ability. They know how to look beyond the obvious. The third thing smart people often say is, what am I missing? Most people look for information that confirms what they already believe. Smart people often do the opposite. They look for the blind spot. Imagine a conflict between two people. One person immediately asks, "Who is right?" But a more intelligent mind may ask, "What don't I know yet?" Maybe there is missing context. Maybe someone has an incentive to hide the truth. Maybe emotion is distorting the situation. Or maybe the obvious explanation is simply the most convenient one. This is where intelligence becomes uncomfortable, because asking, "What am I missing?" means accepting that your perception is incomplete. And human beings don't like feeling incomplete. We prefer clear stories, heroes and villains, right and wrong. But reality is rarely that simple. Nietzsche understood how easily people create explanations that protect their own perspective. And the strange thing about people is, the more emotionally invested they become, the less likely they are to notice what contradicts them. That is why smart people pause. They question the story. They look at what is absent, not only what is visible. Because sometimes the most important part of a situation is the part no one wants you to examine. And the fourth thing smart people say goes even deeper, because it reveals how they respond when understanding matters more than winning. The fourth thing smart people often say is, "Help me understand." Notice the difference. They don't immediately say, "You're wrong." They ask, "How did you reach that conclusion?" This does not mean they agree. It means they want to understand before they judge. And that is much rarer than it seems. Most people listen while preparing their response. They wait for a weakness, a contradiction, a moment to prove the other person wrong. But intelligent people know that understanding someone does not mean surrendering to them. In fact, it gives you something more valuable, a clearer view of how they think, their assumptions, their fears, their motives, their blind spots. Adler understood that human behavior often makes more sense when you look at the hidden purpose behind it. So instead of reacting only to what someone says, a smart person becomes curious about what is happening underneath. Help me understand. Those three words can reveal more than confrontation ever will. Because when people feel understood, they often lower their defenses. And when defenses disappear, the truth becomes easier to see. But there is one final thing smart people say, and it may be the most revealing of all. Because real intelligence is not only about understanding other people, it is about recognizing when your own mind needs to change. The fifth thing smart people are willing to say is, "I changed my mind." For many people, those words feel like defeat. They believe changing their mind means admitting they were weak, wrong, or easily influenced. But watch carefully. A mind that never changes is not necessarily a strong mind. Sometimes it is simply a trapped one. Smart people understand that new information should sometimes create a new conclusion. They do not change their mind because of pressure. They change it because reality has given them a better reason. And this is the hidden truth behind all five phrases. I don't know. I could be wrong. What am I missing? Help me understand. I changed my mind. None of them are designed to make someone sound intelligent. In fact, each one requires the person to temporarily surrender something most people desperately protect: the appearance of being right. That is the real mechanism. Intelligence is not just the ability to know more. It is the ability to remain mentally flexible when your ego wants certainty. So the next time someone speaks with absolute confidence, do not immediately assume you are listening to the smartest person in the room. Listen instead for the person who can question themselves without collapsing. Because perhaps the strongest mind is not the one that always has the answer, but the one that is never too proud to search for a better one. If this made you see intelligence differently, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Shadow Insight. I am the Watcher, and remember, if changing your mind feels like losing, who is really controlling the way you think?